Welcome to Brain Wellness, the podcast. I'm your host, Mandy NP. What started as all things related to brain health and wellness has morphed into largely brain injury health and wellness, with occasional other neurological topics. My mission remains the same, to help you on the path to a healthier brain. So, without further ado, let's get into the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Brain Wellness, the podcast. My guest today is Lee Schwartz. Lee is a speaker, author, advocate, and proud father of two NFL sons, Geoffrey and Mitchell. In his inspiring book, Raising Giants, Lee shared the real-life story of how love, discipline, and vision shaped his sons into elite athletes and grounded men. Lee sits on the West Coast Advisory Board of the Concussion and CTE Foundation. Founded in 2007, the foundation has been deeply committed to researching and studying the cause of CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, with the goal of one day, hopefully sooner than later, having it be diagnosed in the living, which is currently only diagnosable post-mortem, leading to prevention, treatment, or even a cure. Thank you so much for being here today, Lee.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So we kind of got the why, but can you tell me a little bit more about your story? What got you to where you are today?
Well, being the father of two mutant sons who both played in the NFL for 8 years, CTE, when they began playing, wasn't even around. They started in 2000 and 2003 in high school, and CTE wasn't first identified until 2005. So we didn't have any cause to be concerned. We were concerned about injuries below the neck, not above the neck. But obviously, as time has progressed, there have been more and more information about CTE, and you read and hear about all the athletes, whether it's football players, hockey players, soccer players who have been diagnosed with it. So it's been somewhat of an interest for me. But then when I was promoting my book, I was introduced to the CEO and co-founder of the Concussion and CTE Foundation, Chris Nowinski. Mm-hmm. And we started a dialogue. And then he invited me to the first CTE summit that the foundation put on in San Francisco back in February. And being in LA, I thought it's just a trip up the coast and it might be interesting to see. So I went. At the end of the day, he said to me, "So what do you think?" And I had a one-word reaction, and that was sobering. To hear the doctors, the researchers, the clinicians, the former football players, all the people who spoke that day brought it more to reality than it had been previously. And so a little bit after that, I reached out to them and said, I think I'd like to be more involved. And they invited me to be on the West Coast Advisory Board, of which I've been on since March, April, and I've gotten very much involved. It's very much of a passion project for me now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very cool. And the first thing that struck me reading your bio was, what's it like having two NFL sons? Like, there's not a lot of people out there that can say that.
No, there's not. The word that my wife and I have used on a regular basis is surreal. And the further away we get from it, the more surreal it gets in some ways. The last game we saw in person for either Geoffrey or Mitchell, and I think it was well over 200 games collectively from high school through the professional ranks, was the 2020 Super Bowl in Miami when the Kansas City Chiefs, who Mitchell was playing for, played the San Francisco 49ers. And we sat in the stadium and pinched at each other as Mitchell's running out on the field, saying, "Is this real?" So that's how I would explain it. It's just been very surreal, a wonderful experience, obviously, but very surreal.
Yeah. Yeah. So you said you worried about them getting injured below the neck. At any point, did you worry about concussion?
No, I didn't. And maybe naively so, because as time went on, we knew it was becoming more of an issue. But no, not really till I went to the summit and heard much more about it. And then it's like, okay, what's going to happen? And thank goodness to this day, Geoffrey just turned 40. Neither one of them are showing any signs of any issues. But I compare that against one of Mitchell's teammates who last week passed, having taken his life. And there's no doubt that he had CT. He was struggling before that. And at the summit, I asked the woman who runs the brain bank. So there's a brain bank associated with Boston University that the foundation works with to autopsy brains because they can only determine CTE post-mortem. And the woman who runs the brain bank was at the summit. And I asked her very specifically why one would find some well-known quarterbacks who were known to have multiple concussions. Why are they still on TV in their late 60s, early 70s, and apparently showing no signs of any problems. And yet these people at 38 years old and younger are passing. And she was very honest about it. She said, we don't know yet. Genetics, that's why we're studying and what the research is all about, to really identify why it impacts some and why not others.
And I guess that's kind of with anything in the world of concussion. We don't know why some people have long-term effects and why others don't, even in the general population. So it makes sense that we wouldn't know in NFL players either. My oldest son also played football in junior high and high school, and I had lots of people that harassed me. They're like, "Why are you letting your child play football? Aren't you worried about a concussion?" And I at that point, I said, honestly, no, I'm not, because do you forget what I do? Like, I will know if he has a concussion. This is not something he can try to fake away from me. And luckily for me, my child was too big of a klutz and kept hurting himself orthopedically and never had a chance to hurt his head.
Okay.
And
Yeah, but I
he
would
didn't
say to
continue
you,
on after high school. So, yeah.
okay. But I would say to you, the thing that the foundation is also trying to identify, specifically with CTE, does it occur because of the major concussive hits? And the concussive hits are the ones where somebody goes down on the ground and doesn't get up, or gets up and wobbles. There's some visible demonstration of damage. But what they're also concerned about is what they call the non-concussive hits. Those hits that occur from whether a child starts playing at 8 years old in Pop Warner or high school or beyond, where there's no symptomology. But you got to know that the brain is being traumatized. And that's what one of the things they're trying to understand is, how much does that contribute to the onset of CTE or any other, mental issues that they may be realizing. And they don't know the answer to that yet.
It reminds me a little bit about earlier this year. I was at a conference, and there was a lot of military presentations, and they were talking about the subconcussive blasts that they're doing a lot of research on as well, because the same kind of thing, what happens over time with all of those repeated little exposures that don't cause the big injuries that we think about.
And I've learned from the foundation that they are doing some studies with the military. I think there's a Navy commissioned study that's being done. They're concerned about the pilots when they're coming down onto the aircraft, the banging that takes place, or taking off, and the G-forces that are impacting the pilots as they're taking off, and those in the military near the armaments when they go off. I understand there's actually now a distance that they need to stand away from before they light it off. So,
Unfortunately, you can't do that distance in football. You're hitting each other on a pretty good impact. So I read the blog articles that you had written about whether you'd let your kids play in sports now, knowing what you know. For those of the listeners that haven't read that blog article, could you summarize that opinion for us?
Yeah. So the blog is entitled, "What would our decision, or what would the decision be today?"
Yeah.
And it tries to run through the 20 years of time that we spent and, thinking about how would we deal with it today. So I can say for sure that in today's world, and that's part of my advocacy, is use contact sports. We've got to find some other way. The risk reward, shall we say, to me, is just not worth it. Very few kids who play Pop Warner, let's say, if we stick to football, will ever see the field in high school, even, much less college and pros. And yet they're exposing themselves to a lot of risk and damage. So, and the foundation advocates as well, 14 and under, no contact sports like that. And at the summit, I listened to Warren Sapp, who is an NFL Hall of Fame defensive lineman who spoke at 53 years old. And he was there because he's having some challenges, and he admitted to it. And I went to him after his presentation, and I said, "Okay, Warren, if a parent came up to you today and said, I have a kid who wants to play Pop Warner, what would you tell them?" And the first thing he said to me was, "How old are they?" I said, "Does that really matter?" And he said, "Yes." 14 and under, no. So basically, high school is the timeline. And my son, Geoffrey, who has a son who just turned 12, he has always said he will never play youth contact sports. There are just multiple reasons why not. I mean, their brain's still developing, as you well know, right? And doesn't develop fully until their early 20s, I understand. They don't have neck muscles to support their head. So when they get hit by a helmet, they're going to have more movement of the head than they might otherwise. Or if they fall to the ground and bang, they can't keep their head off hitting the ground because they don't have the neck muscles to do that. And the coaching techniques might be substandard. So no, the issue is, to answer your question fully, is what would I tell somebody about playing college and the NFL. And that one is a lot more tricky for them because I'll be very honest, there's some real good things about playing sports, as we all know. The teamwork, the hard work, the overcoming challenges, the collaboration. There's just so much there. And I had such a positive experience that it's hard for me to divorce myself from those positives to say, don't play.
Yeah.
And so I don't have a finite answer today, frankly. I'm leaning more and more towards the not play as I learn about what's happening in the world of mental health and former athletes. But I also recognize the realities. The NFL is here to stay. It's not going away. College football is here to stay. It's not going away. The attraction is too great. I mean, Warren even said, I started at 16. So he didn't play youth contact sports. He said it was my way out of my impoverished neighborhood. And for many families, that is a reality. Football is a way out. So there's a lot of decision making. But the bottom line for me is parents need to basically take their head out of the sand and understand what the pros and cons are, the risks, rewards of having their kids involved in youth contact sports. You got to make an educated decision. You can't just say, oh, well, nothing, it won't happen to my kid, because it very, very well may happen to your kid.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's what I really want your listeners to understand is there still may be a path. And obviously not everybody is getting CTE, and there are alternatives in youth. You could play flag football. You could play other non-contact football or contact sports until later on, but at least know what you're getting into and don't bury your head in the sand. And that's what I think is really important.
So you mentioned flag football, and I've had lots of conversations with people about this and the safety of flag football because they actually don't have any safety equipment on for that. My son played flag football before he ever played contact football, and the kids would accidentally run into each other all the time. There were a couple head hits because somebody tripped on the field and they hit head to head. And there's still, even when we think of a non-contact sports, there's always a risk of contact with something, whether it's another person or the ground or something like that. Is there that big of a difference between flag football and contact football at that point?
Oh, sure. I mean, just look at the games. Put film side by side. There may be a contact in youth football and flag football where two bodies collide, but that's the exception to the rule, and that's not the way the game is played. Intentionally, you're not supposed to do that. Where regular football, that's the intent, is let's tackle and let's cause these hits that lead to potential CT. So there definitely is, to me, a huge distinction. It's the exception to the rule more so in flag. If one took that approach, then what sport would one get involved with? Golf, maybe tennis. But how many times do you see a tennis player fall to the ground and bounce off the ground? They're not going to hit body to body, but they are falling to the ground.
Yep.
So there aren't too many sports.
In golf.
You could.
You can get a golf ball to the head if you're in the wrong spot.
Well,
I used to work a first aid tent for marathons, and we'd have patients collapse, or not patients, but individuals collapse at the finish line and fall and hit their head on the road and have to be ambulanced off. So I don't think there's a truly non-contact sport out there anymore.
Depending on what you consider a sport, right?
True.
If you want to sit at a table and claim that playing, or chess is a sport or something like that, then maybe so.
And it might be safer.
But any of the sports that we know, there's always a possibility. It's just in football, particularly, but also in hockey, in soccer,
lacrosse.
There's a lot more leagues now. I think AYSO prevents heading of soccer balls from 11 and under. In England, they have put in legislation prohibiting heading of the soccer ball from use 11 and under. I just saw a new study. I think it was a new report in New Zealand that they've now got rules about minimum ages of that. So there is recognition, and they're trying to do something about it. But actually, I watched the World Cup recently, and I'm not a big soccer fan per se, but I watched it, and I watched it differently than I ever have. Because every time I saw a soccer player head a ball that went 40 yards down the pitch and kind of shake his head like this, my first thought is, okay, what just happened to his brain? It's just the way I think about it now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I watched the Super Bowl this year, and I was watching to see how many people went to the blue tent and if they came back out. That's what I was watching.
Yeah. And well, thank goodness now that the NFL has put a procedure in play where they have somebody up in the booth upstairs watching and trying to identify people that look like they've been concussed but won't come off, because the players won't come off on their own typically. It's a badge of honor to say, I got my bell rung and I played through it.
I took care of a patient in the emergency room one time when before my injury, I was a stroke provider. So that's most of what I did was stroke medicine. We had a patient come into the emergency room who had stroke symptoms, but it didn't end up being a stroke because at that facility, we had acute imaging that could identify if you were having a stroke at the moment. And there was no stroke that was happening at the moment. But we did see all sorts of little tiny strokes that he had had over the years. And he was a former NFL player, and his job was to break the wedge, which I had to have him describe that to me because I don't know all the terms. I watch the games, but I don't know all the terms. And he basically said that he was literally breaking this wedge of players, and he would wake up 10 yards down the road or down the field every single time, over and over and over again, multiple practices a day. He would wake up 10 yards down the field, and then he'd look back. He'd have to watch the video to see did he do a good job. And that helped explain why he had all of these little tiny strokes on his brain, because he had impact after impact after impact.
Yeah. Geoffrey, my oldest, had an experience while playing for the Carolina Panthers. He was put on the kickoff return team, and he was the level right in front of the receiver. So he was supposed to block and, the people coming downfield that are running at full speed from 40, 50 yards away. And the kick was poorly done. It didn't travel to the goal line where the kickoff guy was waiting for the ball. It bounced into his hands. He literally caught it and started running. And then he got tackled, and he got up, and he thought to himself, that just felt weird in my hip when I got hit, but he didn't think twice about it. As he was running off, he looked behind him. The guy who tackled him was still lying on the ground. He had used his head and hit Geoffrey right in his hip. Geoffrey's 6'6" and 340 pounds. He didn't get up from it. Ultimately he did, but not initially. That was his second concussion in 2 weeks. I don't think he ever played again. So that's kind of the same story about the wedge that you talk about. Yeah. And interestingly, the NFL put a rule into place this last year to try to counteract that. They've been trying to change things to remove some of the injuries. So they changed the kickoff rules such that kickoffs are supposed to be in like a 20-yard range from the goal line to the 20. And so it was intended to reduce injuries. Not quite. What happened was the percentage of kickoff returns rose from 33 to, I think, 74%.
Wow. And
in so doing, concussions went up from 8 to 35. So it was counterproductive.
My goodness.
So they got to go back to the drawing board.
Yeah.
To me, I mean, that was, some people have described it as window dressing. They tried to do something they thought was doing right, but they didn't think it through. If you're going to increase the percentage of kickoff returns, there likely is going to be more injuries incurred because of that. Where the NFL put in something they call guardian caps, right? The soft padding that goes over the helmet. And it was represented as reducing concussions by 20%. The manufacturer says you can't reduce concussions by anything on your head.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, better than anybody, your head is not in place. Your brain's not in place. It moves. And so no padding, no helmet is going to prevent that. And then you get the contra effect of getting hit on one side and impact and trauma, and then the brain moving to the other side and getting hit the second time. So the guardian caps, basically, according to this report, are just not of any value.
Yeah, that's what I saw too.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate. They're trying to do things, but they're not really thinking it through all the way. I know along with those guardian caps, they had changed the amount of times that they could have contact practice in a week. That's probably helping.
I'm sure it is, and but in some ways, it's also counterproductive to the game to a degree. And you'll get competing points of view on this, because the less amount of practice time there is, the less time there is to get better at what you do, or the less time there is for, let's say, somebody who's on second team and wishes to be first team and wants to improve their skills. Well, how do they do that if the number of repetitions during practices are less?
That's true.
So I think in some ways it's impacted the game by not allowing for more skills to be developed. And so it's a balance. It's a real give and take here.
True. I hadn't thought about that part. So here's a controversial question. Why do you think some people still argue whether or not CTE exists?
I think some are motivated by the fact that, I'll give you one example. specifically, the NCAA was recently sued by the family of someone who had some mental challenges in life, and they felt the NCAA was responsible and knew about it. And the jury came back in favor of the plaintiffs, of the family, with punitive awards was over $100 million. But during the case, the attorney for the NCAA dared to say that CTE is a hypothetical disease. Okay. Do I need to explain why he did that? Of course, he's, got to protect his interests. He's being paid by the NCAA. What I'd like him to do is come talk to the mother of a former professional ice hockey player who I met during a fundraising event a few months ago for the foundation. And she was introduced and asked to speak. And she started off her comments by saying, "I hope you don't think I'm a miserable person." And I wondered, what was that? She said, "My son died at 33. He had played professional ice hockey. He died in an auto accident. But frankly, when he died, I was happy he passed. He was suffering so much." So I'd love that attorney or anybody else who wants to say that it doesn't exist to talk to the legacy family members who had to live through this and understand it's real. It's not going away, or talk to the woman who runs the brain bank to hear all the stories. This was just diagnosed. CT was just diagnosed in a 15-year-old. Now, and then two 17-year-olds who were former football players. As I said earlier, the only way to diagnose is post-mortem. So what does that tell you about what happened to those three kids? 15 was the youngest that it's ever been diagnosed. And the NFL has made comments to the effect, well, we can't diagnose it in young kids like that, so we don't know if it exists. Well, okay, now here's the contra. So why others don't want to accept it? I wish I was more of a psychologist to give you a better answer. Some people just want to run and hide. It's never going to happen. It's never going to happen to me. So let's just pretend it doesn't exist. And most people, I don't think, don't spend the time to educate themselves about what is CTE, how does it come about, what are the risks and rewards, et cetera, et cetera. They just don't. And because in their world, it doesn't exist.
Are you, being on the foundation, are you aware of any studies or anything that's happening right now to try to identify it while people are living?
Well, there's a lot of studies. Yeah, there's a number of studies going on. And from what I'm being told, they're getting closer and closer through, spinal fluid, blood work. There's a number of different studies ongoing actively, because that's the first step, is let's find out who might have it. Second step is, do you want to know if you can find out? And then how do you stem the tide? What are the treatments? And ultimately they want to find a cure, but it's got to go in stages. And first they've got to be able to identify it in those that are living. And I know a couple of people who are in active studies for that particular purpose.
Yeah. I've had a handful of patients come to me for a consultation because they've had numerous concussions and now they have behavior changes, mental health changes, and they're concerned if they have it. And sadly, at this point, I can't give them any definitive answers. I can say, well, we can look at your symptoms and we can try to manage your symptoms, but at the current moment, we don't have any way to diagnose it while you are still
not conclusively,
living,
right?
breathing.
You can look at their personality changes, behavioral changes, attitudinal changes, which can be indications. I mean, there are 4 stages of CTE, and each one has been identified with what might be the possible symptoms, and so people can see. I will also share with you that the foundation has a helpline that is staffed 24/7. If one wants to go to, it's concussion, the word and CTE, all consecutively, concussioncte.org. In the top right of the homepage, there's a button that says helpline, and they can talk to people there who staff the helpline to talk about their symptoms, their concerns, and what they may be able to do to deal with it.
Good to know. Is there any work with the foundation outside of NFL players?
I know they have studied the brains of NASCAR driver, of hockey players, of a broad swath of people. So I don't think they're confined to just football players. I mean, I should say I know that because they obviously are studying those beyond. There was a recent hockey player, Claude Lemieux, who 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago, 3 days after he had his number retired at 64, committed suicide. And the family sent his brain to the brain bank, and it was identified as having stage 2 or stage 3 CTE. So yeah, I think their door is wide open. It doesn't matter. Football, just kind of the central focus. The founder of it, Chris, the co-founder, I should say, Chris, he played college football at Harvard, and then he went on to wrestle, professional wrestling, and he had a major concussion. And that's when his eyes got open and said, there's something going on. So he's working with the Professional Wrestling Foundation
Yeah.
to work with them to find ways to better train and better do their acts out there. So they're not pounding their head on the mat all the time or hitting each other. So yeah, it's a broad swath of sports that are being assessed.
Is it a requirement with the brain bank that people have a contract in place before they pass, or can families call afterwards?
Well, I think they can call afterwards because from what I'm reading, there have been numbers of people who have passed that I don't think had gone through the protocol. There is a protocol in place.
Sure.
If one wants to volunteer to have their brain assessed upon death, there's a questionnaire, there are certain steps, a couple of different steps to be taken. I think there's some blood work that's done prior to, but I don't think it's absolute that they need to have gone through those steps to ultimately have their brain assessed upon death.
Good to know.
But I can ask that question to be sure.
Yeah, sure. That's just kind of good knowledge for me if I should have another patient come through, or my colleagues if they should have a patient that's even concerned about that.
Yeah, the more I am in touch with the legacy members of those families who have passed, the more I hear about how traumatic it is for the families to deal with this before death, even as the personality changes, as the person they knew no longer exists, and they don't know why, and they can't connect the dots. And they have said to me, I just wish I knew about the foundation before this, because that's what the foundation is there to do, is help these families through the steps and to identify what's going on if they can, and give them some recognition of what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah. In a perfect world, what would you like to see for the future of TBI and CTE?
Well, in a perfect world, I'd hate to see anybody die moving forward, but I know that's not reality. That's going to happen. So let's start. I mean, there's this old expression, how do you eat an elephant? One small bite at a time, right? So if we could get to the point where even the NFL would say no youth contact sports, find other ways, that would be a great first step. Now, there's a couple of generations that we have to live through then to see what the results of that is. But I firmly believe that that's really important. But then just getting the word out that there is the brain bank and the foundation available to help people who believe that they've got a loved one, or who they themselves think that they've got some mental issues taking place. It's a resource, and wish that was more widely known and more widely referenced.
Yeah, I think that's great. Education has been kind of the top thing in all of my interviews lately. What's the thing you'd love to see? And it's education. I think that's where we need to start on everything. And we can kind of go from there.
Because it is real.
Yeah.
Andy, it is real. It's not something that is just this hypothetical disease, or it's not gonna impact me. Yeah, it very well may.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's on autopsy, we can diagnose it. It's a similar protein as we find in Alzheimer's. And we readily acknowledge that we can't diagnose Alzheimer's definitively until a patient passes as well. So it's not out of the realm of what we see on a day-to-day basis with other medical conditions, that we can't diagnose it until the post-mortem exam. It's why people think that it doesn't exist is kind of beyond me because of that.
I know.
But,
I mean, Alzheimer's gets more, I think, publicity. So people are more aware of the prospects of that happening, or at some level of dementia, Lewy body, or whatever the case may be. It's more in the public domain. CTE maybe is getting buried because it's more of a football thing.
Yeah.
I don't know, a sports thing. But as broad as its thing, there's a study that's supposed to come out the end of August, which might help to quantify what the chances are of someone who played contact sports coming down or suffering from CTE. And that could be very monumental.
Yeah.
If they can put some hard numbers to it.
Yeah. That'd be interesting to see. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there any projects coming up or anything else that you would like to share? Your book, for example.
Yeah, my book is available on Amazon. It's called Raising Giants, My Extraordinary Journey with Two NFL Sons. And I chronicle the 20 years and then time before as they were growing up, and the time since and what they've done since. But it's a big focus on the 20 years of watching them develop from, as I would say, and as I said in the book, my older son, the clod he was as a high school freshman, to both of them playing 8+ years in the NFL, and all that goes into the transitions from high school to college, the recruiting, and from college to pros and the draft, and a lot of the behind the scenes activities that we experience that a lot of football fans, who are short for fanatics, might love to hear about and learn about. So that's, like I say, available on Amazon. And otherwise, just, all the activities that are, with the foundation, I would encourage all your listeners to at least become knowledgeable about it and or share with their friends who may have kids playing youth football or know people who are maybe having some mental challenges. Contact the foundation and get some help and support.
Yeah, absolutely. Where can people find you and or the foundation to learn more?
Well, the foundation is, like I said earlier, concussion and CTE.org. And it's just a wealth of knowledge. And for me, probably the best place is to go to raisinggiantsbook.com. And you mentioned the 2 blogs that I had sent you. That's where they reside, along with other information about me, the boys, the book, other blogs I've written, other articles I've written. So that's where they can find that.
Awesome. And I will include those links in the show notes so people can
Great.
find those easier and hopefully not write things down while they're driving, but they will be there. Yeah. We don't need any more injuries from that. As we wrap up today, Lee, any other last words of wisdom that you'd like to share? Educate and awareness. Don't stick your head in the sand. It's there. It's real. What's that old saying? Don't go blindly into the night. Yeah. Good. Yeah. Good words to end on. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. Yeah. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Brain Wellness, the podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, I encourage you to subscribe, leave a comment, and share it so that others can benefit. Please also consider supporting the show by buying me a coffee. The link is in the show notes. You can also go to www.brainwellnesssolutions.com to catch the latest info and get links on all of the social medias there. See you next time.